and welcome. My name is Julia Tricky and I'm a botanical artist and tutor. However, since the start of 2021, it has been my privilege to host these Zoom webinars where I have been inviting fellow botanical artists to share their work and their wisdom and the things that they do best. This talk today is actually the best bits from all the talks last year. And I have to say, it was really hard to choose the best bits because there were so many. In fact, I would say it's a bit of a lie. I've just chosen some extracts to show you, and there are lots of things that you would have loved to see that I can't include because of the time. So I'm going to give you today a little background to the talks. I'm going to show you some short extracts and images, and then I'm just going to encourage you to see the speakers that are coming up this coming year, and then address some frequently asked questions. So the background to the talks, March 2020, and the UK went into lockdown. And this is my beautiful hometown of Bath, and it's so unusual to see these streets as empty as this. Look, no tourists, but look also no work for some of us. And yes, things changed overnight. And like a lot of tutors of all sorts of subjects, I had to think creatively about how I could teach. And I had done some pre-recorded tutorials before, but I decided to expand this to start with. And so this is my desk one day when I was doing a pre-recorded tutorial on surface texture, and you can see I'm just working on figs. The people watching would only have seen the fig and probably the plate with a paint on, but absolutely chaos. But it was fun to do, but very time consuming and energy consuming, but needs must, as it were. So like a lot of people, I then became aware of Zoom, and primarily to contact family, I suppose, initially, but then realized the potential of teaching. So although the world in some ways had become very small, we were stuck at home, it meant that you could reach out to people all over the world. And I was privileged to be invited by various groups, including the New England Society of Botanical Artists, to share my own work and to speak to them about what I did. And this is my setup for that particular talk, I think. And I decided to keep it really low tech. So you'll see I've just got bits of paper under this document camera. And I decided I would do that rather than a PowerPoint slideshow, just to keep the tech as basic as possible. I soon realized I had to buy new equipment and get my head around how to use PowerPoint more often. So meanwhile, and these pictures are blurred on purpose because this is my regular class, we also went on to Zoom. So these are people I would normally teach face-to-face, and I started teaching them on Zoom. But it occurred to me that actually I could invite some of my botanical art friends who were teachers just to come and share from wherever they lived, share their work, and to talk to my class for a quarter of an hour or so as part of the online classes. And it was very successful. That the class really loved having these visitors. Different voice, different techniques from the way I work, I think, was part of the attraction, which was absolutely great. So that was 2021. And then, sorry, that was 2020. So at the beginning of 2021, it became very clear that the pandemic still was hanging around. And that I was going to have to continue with online teaching. But it occurred to me that some of these tutors that had come to my regular class could actually do these talks again and maybe make them a bit longer, and I could just advertise it more widely. I mean, I wasn't the only person doing this sort of thing, but it seemed that it would tick several boxes, and it would be a way of supporting fellow botanical art tutors, because it would give them a chance to share more widely, perhaps, what they did best, but also I could pay them a bit more. It would also reach those interested in botanical art. So perhaps these people that are stuck at home in the UK, not part of a group, and that they could sort of then tap into looking over the shoulders of well-known botanical artists. Little did I realise that the interest would go far beyond the UK, and it's really encouraging that some of the emails I have, that people living a long way away have been able to tap into these talks when they wouldn't normally be able to have access to botanical art tutors. My thought, this time Christmas last year, was to replicate in-person lectures. So what I mean by that is that you would pay for a talk, you would turn up, you would watch the lecture, and and that would be captured a moment in time. And that is why, if you're a regular here, you'll know that I release a recording of the talk if you're not able to watch live, but it only lasts a couple of days. So you sort of had to be there. That was the thought at the time. And also, as well as being able to pay the tutors, I would generate some income for myself. And that is why I charge. So it'd be lovely to be able to do all these free, but there is, you know, various, we all need to put bread and butter on the table, don't we? So here are the speakers that spoke in 2021. We've got Siobhan, Lucy Smith, Lara, Deborah, Martin, Carrie, Laura, Anne, Lizzie, Mariella, Katherine, Mary Dillon, Sarah Gould, Sarah Morris, Jill Condy, and Helen Allen. And actually there's one photo missing from there, and that's me, actually, because I did the first talk. I thought that's the way to go, and I decided I would talk about a painting start to finish, and this is the painting in question. I'm going to turn my video off now, which you may not see on the recording anyway, and then I'm just going to play this part of my talk where I was talking about how on earth you go about tackling roots on a painting like this. The reason I chose to do this subject actually was because of the roots and because they were hard. So the idea was to challenge myself to do something that perhaps I couldn't do or that I hadn't done before. So yeah, so it was the roots were the thing that attracted me. Now, when you're trying something that's quite challenging, and it may be something just like a flower may be challenging for you, and that's absolutely fine. But I always think you need to break it down into different tasks. So even though these looked really daunting, as you can see, I decided I would break them down. I wouldn't look at the massive dried up roots on the right. I would just look at the big juicy ones, sorry, on the left. I would just look at the big juicy ones on the right and get those in first and forget the others, because then I didn't have to panic about them. So that's what I did. Hopefully you can see in this drawing that I've drawn out the main ones, and I've just started to do the sort of thinner ones behind. But at least I could think, I'm on the way, I've started the roots, maybe it's going to be okay. And yes, so I think I even may have painted some of these in before I got any further. Yes, you can see on the left, I thought, okay, before I end up with a drawing where I don't know where I'm coming and going and which way the roots are, I am going to paint these in a little bit. So I've done that, because if you imagine, you could see in the middle of that left picture, there is a, let's see if I can just get a pointer. Okay, never mind. In the middle of that picture, you can just see a pencil drawing. Can you see that? Yes, okay, I've got a little arrow anyway. You can see this pencil drawing. Now, without painting on there, you might end up painting the wrong bit. So it would be really useful just to block this in, even if it's done quite crudely from the beginning. And the painting on the right then is taken a little bit further along. So that's a little extract of my talk about this painting. As you can see, in terms of composition, I tend to just place things in the middle of the page. It's not overly creative, not like some of these compositions here of the ferns and Aristolochia. Now, these are the work of Laura Silburn, who's a Cornwall-based botanical artist and tutor. And Laura has done the RHS show in London several times. I've got several gold medals for her ferns, for Aristolochia. And so she was going to come and talk to us about planning and process for the RHS show, how she went about going from start to finish, painting these hardy geraniums, actually. So we're just going to dip in now when she's talking a little bit about composition ideas.
Okay, so the next stage from then was, you got a feel for the plants, you kind of understand their structure. You need to make some major decisions. So at this point, you need to start thinking about how big your painting is going to be, what they're going to include and what they're not going to include, and how the plant material will be posed. So I did loads of work on this, and I wanted to show you how much this doesn't have to be finished, well executed ideas, but mostly this consisted of lots of scribbles in a sketchbook, which probably again wouldn't mean much to anyone else. But my sketchbook is a process, it's not a finished piece. I would love to be one of those people who do beautiful sketchbooks, and they are like pieces of art in themselves, and they are fantastic to look at. But I'm not, and that's not me, and that's not what I need. What I need to help my brain through the process is to scribble and to react and to redraw and to visualize over and over again until I've honed it down to the picture that I want. Now, drawing thumbnails and drawing small means that you can do this very quickly. It also means you don't get bogged down in detail. And it also means that you can visualize something as if you're looking at it across the gallery from a distance. So really useful to do lots and lots of little sketches, and they don't have to be, you know, I can look at these and understand what I was meaning when I did those scribbles. I can, as long as you can understand them, that's what matters. Okay, so
the show that Laura was talking about, or that was preparing for, was the RHS show. And here's a photograph of the show. It's not like this now, but this is a previous incarnation. And at the front here, these fern paintings were Laura's submission this particular year this photo was taken. And actually, I've got a little trade stand at the back. So yeah, if you're thinking of taking your botanical art to the next level, considering entering for the RHS show is something worthwhile. And you can do this from anywhere in the world. And yeah, so if you're interested in being a bit more business savvy, the talk you needed to attend was this one by Katherine Tyrrell, Business Savvy Botanical Art. And it was absolutely packed full of interesting ideas and useful information. And we're just going to listen in. Here's Katherine. She manages and has the most amazing website for botanical art and artists. So if you ever need any information, that's a good starting point. And we're just going to listen in now as she talks about being a starving or a thriving artist.
This comes from a book called Real Artists Don't Starve by Jeff Goins, and I think it's a lovely little illustration of the difference between the traditional way people think of artists and what the artists that can do. So starving artists is all the stuff on the left. People who wait to be noticed, the ones who work alone, they work in private, really get quite sniffy about the need to be businesslike. And on the right, we have all the people who know that you aren't born an artist, you become an artist. You're people who find people who do well and learn from masters. You cultivate patrons and collectors. You're happy to collaborate with other people. You're happy to give demonstrations in public. You know you've got to master many skills. You know that in order to make art, you need to make money. And becoming business savvy also involves finding people, somebody who is a mentor to learn from, finding a network of people who are like you or people who can help you. I've from personal experience, I know this, it's a really good idea to join a group of people who can share and support with you, a buddy group if you like. There are lots of patrons around who really want to help artists. That's what I do. I don't give people money, I give them help. And you might think finding a good teacher vis-a-vis business might be quite a good idea. One of the ways of becoming business savvy is to recognize that there are new income streams and ways of funding that you can take advantage of. But mostly you have to develop yourself. You need to push your boundaries, you learn new knowledge and skills, develop characteristics of the can-do, go places people. If you're finding this all too much, don't worry about it. It's fine. There's going to continue to be lots of room for everybody who just wants to carry on as you are.
That's a relief, isn't it? If you're not interested in being business savvy, that is absolutely fine. I just want to introduce you now to Lucy Smith, who is a professional botanical artist and does a lot of work, although she's freelance, she does a lot of work for Kew Gardens. And here is just a small portion of some of her pen work, Palms of New Guinea. And she keeps saying she's nearly finished on these, but there are I can't remember how many she's done, but many of these. So this was her work for Kew, but this is a bread and butter work, as it were, but she came to talk to us about a passion project. So something she really just wanted to do. It wasn't about making money. It was just following a passion. And it was painting the Victoria water lilies in Kew Gardens. And here are some of the paintings. And she talked through her process of drawing, of collecting the flowers, but also she wanted to paint a leaf.
I wanted a leaf that was manageable to paint, because I had this crazy idea to do a life-size leaf. So in November, there was leaves around about 1 meter in size, and Jean-Michel Touche cut one for me, and I just love watching this video. So he's just gone in, reached over and cut the petiole, and he's just floating the leaf in the water to me. Here it comes. You have to be very careful because the underside of the leaves are covered in prickles, and they will very easily pierce your waders. And you don't want leaky waders. There it is. Isn't it beautiful? I'll just play it one more time. You can hear the waterfall of the Princess of Wales Conservatory in the background. So these plants have an incredible amount of growth in just, 7 months. Eventually they're taken out of the pond because they just start shrinking, and they reduce. So it's okay to cut a leaf at this point. Okay. Now, Jean-Michel had discovered a really good way of flipping the leaf over, because I wanted to see the underside, and that's what I was going to photograph first because it was the most important part. So look at that. You've got well done. 2 paddles, and I just flipped it over. Isn't it stunning? It's so exciting to see the underside of these leaves. I'll just play it one more time. And people who are in the conservatory always go, wow, when they see this happen. And that the staff often cut a leaf and just put it upside down for the public to see.
Do you want it on top of
Okay, I could just play that all night, but I won't. I was showing Julia how, when this is behind me, it looks like it's quite close, but I'll just wheel back on my chair and you can see how big it is. Hang on. Going. There it is.
So an amazing project from Lucy, project of passion. And I think you can get prints of her leaf painting. So do look that up if that interests you. Another project that was really interesting was by Jill Condy. So she went to Madagascar in search of baobabs. Here's Jill at work on a different project. And yes, like I say, in 2013, she was invited to illustrate a book on baobab. So she accompanied the author, on her first expedition to Madagascar. So they found 6 of the 8 species, which was great, and then returned in 2019. So she shared with us some of the allure of the island and the challenges of working in remote locations. I just have stills from Jill's talk on this occasion. So here are the trees, which are an amazing size and amazing structure. You can't take this specimen home to your studio. I like to pick my flower, pick my leaf, pick whatever and take it home, but you can't obviously with a tree like this. So here's Jill sitting doing some initial sketches. You can't really control the lighting, although for me this would suit me because the light is shining on the left of the tree. Yeah, so that's the baobab tree. She was also in search, she also wanted to depict the flowers, and if you look in the central photo, you can see a couple of chaps clambering up the tree to get some specimens for her to paint. And here are some of her drawings. So she talked us through the process of drawing and also shared with us some of her final paintings, which are really glorious. My understanding is this project is still ongoing, but there will be a book. So keep an eye out for that. Here's some more of her paintings. And also a copy of the fruit, or a painting of the fruit. And you'll see in the background that I've also included some of the graphite pencil drawings of just the trees. And they're just so magical and fantastical looking to me, a Western person, as it were. I've never seen anything like it. And that sort of fairy tale element leads me nicely on to Mariella. So Mariella's subject was far-fetched botanical. So she wanted to do a series of paintings for an exhibition that were plants that inspired fairy tales. Okay, so what do I mean by that? Here's Mariella. And so you've got brambles, which will be Sleeping Beauty. She painted runner beans from Jack and the Beanstalk. And she did loads of research for these paintings, deciding on the best plants. She wanted them to look fairly traditional in style. There's the pumpkin from Cinderella. She said there were loads more that she could have done, and she did do more than these. I'm afraid I haven't got time to show you them all. But interestingly, she also did these lovely images on gold.
I was also interested in iconography and looking at golden paintings, and I chose to take one element from each of the paintings and put them on gold as little treasures.
I think those were quite popular apparently at the exhibition where she was showing her work. It was a solo exhibition, and she put the plants in the front of the gallery window to give it that magical feel. And she talked us through how she went about framing, her decisions for framing and for hanging the exhibition. So that was really interesting for anybody that wanted to think along a theme and how you take it from the idea right through to the exhibition. Laura Corgastinger, some of you may have heard of. She's an American artist. I'm sure you'll have heard of her. She is known for her perpetual journal, how to start and maintain a perpetual journal. And if you haven't heard of her, you will of now. And she talked to us about how this came about as an idea.
And then I started on this big project, and this is where the idea for the perpetual journal started. And if you're a botanical artist, I encourage you to do this for a client. It's a genius idea. I had a client, and I said, I'll be your eyes and ears for like a whole year. I will go and once a week, I'll come to your house. I'll take this beautiful book out to the field and just draw everything that's happening that week. And so they have this beautiful book of 52 weeks of their property. And it was a wonderful project. And so here's one page and another page. And so it was after I finished that, I said, well, how do I keep doing that? That was successful because, you know, I got paid, right? And it was a job. And so then I came up with the idea. Actually, I have to give my husband credit. He came up with the idea of a perpetual journal. And so if you're on Instagram, you can follow the hashtag LG Perpetual Journal.
Let's do follow Lara on Instagram if you don't already, because she does live sessions when you can see her drawing in her perpetual journal. She talked us through how to go about preparing a journal, what equipment you need, but she also talked about a different project which I thought was quite interesting. Here's a picture of her actually, drawing in a perpetual journal, and here are some of the pages that she shared with us from her journal. But she also talked about this project, which I thought was really interesting too.
And then most recently, my perpetual journal and the pandemic had a union. And so if you follow me on Instagram, you might have seen this, where I started this sort of, I guess it was a perpetual project where every 50 days, I changed the color and I would just paint plants that I saw. It wasn't every day. People thought, oh, I do something every day. No, I find that impossible to do. So my very first thing was this, it's hard to see here, but it's a bloodroot. And so I painted with neutral tint. And so that's, no, I'm sorry, Payne's Gray, sorry. Right here. And then you can see some other ones, some Mayaples coming up. And then I kind of just went through, and then I got all the way down to the bottom. And then when I got to the bottom, I was like, well, this is kind of boring because they were also spread out and they were just so simple. I was like, well, I'm going to start another round, but I'll change the color. So then I went to sepia, and then I painted the mountain laurel and the lady slipper. and then went down. And then I started getting other people's input and saying what colors next. I don't know if all my color selections were wise, but then I did green, and then raw umber, and yellow ochre, and let's see, sort of this like alizarin sort of bluish color, and then neutral tint. And so I did it for a whole year. And so this is all the plants that I sort of saw the last year, starting March, like 14 till the following month. So here's the bloodroot coming up, actually emerging again. And what's cool is that, here's some close-ups of it, is that I would draw the plant. I happen to be drawing it just in the perpetual journal anyways, and then I would add it to this painting also.
What an amazing pandemic project that Laura's undertaken. And my understanding is actually that you can get prints of her pandemic work with all those different plants on. And so we're going from somebody who's working and drawing many different plants to a couple of artists that have a particular focus. And I want to start with Deborah Lambkin. Now, Deborah has painted many, many orchids. She does paint other things, but she paints orchids. And so she came to talk. Her talk was entitled 500 Orchids and Counting. And she's painted many more, but she did emphasize that there are thousands of orchids, so she's still got quite a long way to go. So Deborah has been the orchid artist to the Royal Horticultural Society Orchid Committee since 2005. And you could see the committee there. And the committee meets regularly to talk about all aspects of the orchid industry, which includes judging new orchids. And you can just see them looking at the plants there. And so Deborah's task is to paint any orchids given an award of merit at the committee meetings.
After the orchid meeting, I take the orchids and you can see, we cut the stems, put them into little files of water, florist tubes of water, and I lay them on cotton wool, and I put them into sealed containers. And when I take them home, I keep them in my fridge. And even if there's only one flower on a plant, I am the lucky person who gets to take it home at the end of the meeting. The people who submit their orchids to be judged have to allow for the orchid to come home and be painted.
Okay, she's also going to talk a little bit about her style of painting, how she paints in layers. So let's just have a look at this stage by stage.
I want to just go through a painting, one painting, all the stages, just so you can see how I build up the paint in layers. There's my very simple line drawing at the beginning. I often add in my yellows first to try and just, it helps keep the yellows clean, I find, when I put them in. Now, I will add more later, but just to get the, start building up the color and get the warmth in there early. I add details gradually with my brushes. And there I've added in the greens, and I just gradually building up the color and building up. I always work from what's furthest away from me to what's closest to me. And I think that makes it helps with making it look more three-dimensional. I'm not sure quite why, but I always will leave the lip till last. I also, you can see, I leave a hairline of white, which I may fill in with a bit of color later, but by leaving that hairline of white where it's overlapping something in the background, it really helps to throw it forward. And they're building the color up. This orchid, I loved this orchid. That's why I don't usually take photos as I'm going along with stages, because I just don't think to. But this one I did because I just thought it was so beautiful. I love that it goes from the really warm yellows all the way through to the very edge where it actually is almost kind of a bluish pink. I used every color in the rainbow in this orchid. And there, I think that's pretty, oh no, almost finished. So you can see the difference. And again, you can still see that little hairline of a light edge just catching the light. And there's the finished painting. And again, alongside the orchid, just so you can compare them.
orchids to fruit. These paintings are actually on vellum, and they are the work of Sarah Gould. So Sarah came and gave us a very comprehensive talk on painting on vellum, which included talking about the process of making vellum or preparing the skins, which is done at a company called Cowley's. And you'll see top left Sarah having a go herself. There are parts of the process which are kept absolutely secret, but that also as artists you can go and visit and have a go at preparing the vellum yourself. And it'll make you realise why vellum is so expensive. So she talked us through that process. She also talked about how she would go about preparing the vellum to paint. So you'll just see her here. They're using some pounce on this small piece of vellum. But also she's passionate about colour mixing. Well, let her tell you about this.
Okay, so this is paint mixing, palette work. I'm quite keen on palette work. The idea really is to get all the colours of something that you're painting or you're about to paint, like this mango. And you get all your colours onto the palette before you start and let it all dry out. So you've done all your hard colour mixing actually beforehand, and you're aiming to get as if you've dropped that mango onto the palette and it's shattered into bits, and then you're going to reassemble it again as a painting. So here I'm just collecting up some paint from my yellow box to find these lovely colours of this mango, and I'm mixing lots of different colours and mixing across the colours so that they're mixing into one another. And I say to my students, if I can count the number of colours on your palette, you haven't got enough. You really need a huge variety. You couldn't count the number of yellows in that mango. You can see the core colour, you know, you can see that core orangey colour, and you can see the red and you can see the green, but you can't, you know, there's so many colours there, you can't really count them. And you can find them all in your paint box by mixing, by dibbing in and out. And that's what I'm doing here, just by eye, just flicking my eye across from the mango to the paint box and choosing something else to try.
We'll leave that there, but here's a copy of the finished painting, which I think you'll admit glows on this vellum. And she talked through her process and she talked through her technique, but you'll remember her boxes there, and I've just screenshot this picture of the many different colours that she uses. And as artists, we're all quite different actually in this respect. And so look at this little paint box, which has got 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 colours and some white. And this paint box bottom right is belongs to Martin Allen. And Martin Allen is passionate about colour, and he's passionate about colour in realistic botanical art. So that was his subject. And he was talking about the illusion of colour. And well, let me just let him talk a little bit about this.
So we can do something similar to this optical illusion with tone. So I'm going to go on to one on tone. So just looking at this image, it's just me taking a photograph from a book, and I'll say the book next. So those two inner squares there, that you can see they're both grey, they look pretty much the same. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to isolate those colours. Can you see? And that's the actual colour. So they weren't pretty much the same. The one on the right was very much darker. And if you look up to the left-hand, top left-hand corner up here, that colour, can you see with my arrow over it, is the same as this one. That one is the same as that one. Now I'm going to go back to the previous slide. And there's those two blocks again. That colour is the same colour as that. Now, I think you'd agree that colour was the same colour as that one, so the light grey looks the same, but you wouldn't agree that that necessarily looks the same as that. And even though I'm proving it by isolating the colour, to show it like that. Even though I proved it, you still wouldn't think it. So to bring this to botanical art, this is one of the reasons why this difficulty in perceiving how dark a tone is when it's surrounded by a darker tone. This is one of the difficulties when we are doing shadows or the dark side of our painting. And this is why often people's paintings look pale and washed out in watercolor. It's nothing to do with the actual watercolor, it's to do with your perception.
So I've cut Martin off in his flow there, but he went on to talk about how to apply this sort of optical illusion theory to painting. And he was talking specifically about this rose hip, and he talked us through his process, his, physically how he paints, how he mixes colors, and how he applies the paint and the finishing touches to his work. So he was really interested in theory of painting, and how that is applied. And so botanical art consists of botany and art, and he was really interested in this sort of theory of art, as it were. But I'm just going to introduce you to Helen Allen, who was particularly taken by some theory of the botany side of things. And so her talk was called The Great Reveal, Hidden Numbers and Geometry in Flowers. And Helen had been inspired by a course that she went on. So the course was called Sacred Geometry at the Prince's School of Traditional Arts, which is a place in London. And so she'd gone on this course. It was going to be nothing to do with botanical art, but surprise, surprise, the pattern and order of nature came up quite a lot on the course. And so this triggered her to start really looking out for these patterns, for the way that things open, and just the shapes that you see. So unfolding daffodils, clear triangular bud as seen from above. And she talked about different plants where she'd noticed this and recorded this. There was tulips, and here's a little bit of her talking about irises.
And then I just thought these irises were a lot of fun as well. And the floral formula is not so different from the crocuses. But just looking down on each one, it is incredible just to see that pattern, that threeness. They're a bit more like propellers, aren't they? And the stamen tucked in underneath. It's just wonderful. Not that you can see it too much here, but both these are from Arthur Harry Church again, and show very clearly the construction in this beautiful longitudinal section. So trimirrors, three mirrors, threefold symmetry, threeness. So it goes on.
And here on the back of Helen's talk is a lovely iris painting. This has actually been painted in egg tempera, which is quite unusual for botanical art. Most artists perhaps use watercolor, but this is by an artist called Carrie Di Costanzo, who American artist, and her talk was about egg tempera and the materials you need and the techniques that she uses. And so again, I'm just going to show you some stills. Apologies because of time. And she talked through how you actually make the egg tempera, the different ingredients, as it were, that you need. And also she talked through her process. I'm going to whiz through these, but if you're watching the recording, you can just stop and read the text more closely. So many layers and dry brush. She said that's still applied loosely, but I think that looks quite dry to my mind. But maybe she means not so precisely. And then gradually more and more refined layers. And this obviously isn't the same tulip, but here's a finished red parrot tulip and a white dahlia and a peony. I mean, look at the amazing colours in those petals. Yeah, so fantastic. And back to her lovely iris. So yes, so as well as artists who are talking about particular subjects they're passionate about, we've also had people talking about different media, different things that you can use. So Carrie was using egg tempera. Anne Swan is very well known and teaches all over the world, and she is well known for her coloured pencil work. And here is a recent piece, so combining graphite and coloured pencil in this case. So her title was Creative Colour Mixing with Coloured Pencil. And she introduced us to all sorts of aspects of coloured pencil work. And I'm just showing you screenshots of her talk. But here she's just talking about a discovery that she made.
All of the light colours in coloured pencil, literally all of them, have got some form of titanium white in, I think, and that makes them resist other colours. So when you make marks with these veins or spots or some little veins, I'm pressing fairly heavily because otherwise you don't get a full resist. There you are, the pencil's just broken, so that indicates how heavily I'm pressing. You can't see the marks very well, and you won't see with this really, but this is the UV torch. I just wanted to show you this because it's brilliant. If I can just get the edge of the UV, the camera doesn't like the UV, but there you are. Can you see the marks?
Yeah,
So,
that's coming out, Anne, I can see that.
Yeah, so when you use a UV torch with any of these lighter color pencils that have got titanium white in, they show up like this. And it's brilliant. Then you can get your veins placed really neatly. You can get all your markings and your hairs or anything else that you need to put down in the right place without any lines overlapping. So it's a brilliant thing. I don't know how I managed for so long without them. I only discovered them about 5 years ago. And a student mentioned it to me in America. So just to show you the resist effect, this is a mid-green going over those marks, and they're showing up. I can just about see them. Now, if I use a solvent, this is an alcohol-based solvent, they'll show up very clearly.
So the solvent obviously doesn't dissolve the titanium white, does it? Then?
No, it doesn't, no. And I found that out by accident, luckily, right at the beginning of my career. When I was doing, in those days, I used to do pictures with backgrounds, sounds awful, so little poses of flowers with little background. And I thought one day I'd just put a bit of yellow down to have a little sun effect coming through the background. And then I layered over my soft blues and so on for my clouds. And then I melted it with terps in those days. And all these lines for the yellow showed through. And I thought, oh, for God's sake, so I had to start all over again. But then my brain started thinking, well, if that happens there, could I use it for stamens? Could I use it for veins? Yes, you can. And now, of course, with all the different solvents that you get, they are still toxic, so do use them carefully, but they work very well. So here we've got some dry resist. So the veins have been put in, and then I've layered up my green mix on top. And here we've got the same thing, but I've used solvent to melt the color.
Sometimes accidents can turn out for good. So here's Anne with a more recent painting again. Coloured pencil piece. And I think really interesting use of graphite as well. Wonderful combination. So let me introduce you also to Sarah Morrish, Sarah Morrish has been working in pen and ink. She does paint as well, but she's devoted the last couple of years at least to preparing for this book, Natural History Illustration in Pen and Ink, which I think is available in the UK, but has just come out in the States as well. And it's a very comprehensive book about pen and ink work. But actually, when she came to do a talk here, she was talking about strand line and marine discoveries in pen and ink.
So next, I'm going to take you through the stages of mark making, and this is where using different nib sizes really comes into play and can help with depicting the atmospheric perspective, as we call it, that adds depth to our work. So sometimes using the different nib sizes sometimes it will just give a subtle indication of stronger degrees of perspective, but it can certainly help. So this was in the early stages of inking, and I used a 005 sepia Pigma micron pen for the main amount of outlining around the base of the holdfast. But for the rear stipe and the rear holdfast, I used a 003, so the smallest nib, because I just wanted that slight difference. And then I started creating the darkest tones, the shadows, but I didn't actually take them to full completion. So I started with a 005 and then moved up to a 01 pen, which was slightly larger, to create the darker areas. Then moving on, I've started with further mark making. And again, that rear holdfast, I've used the 003 sepia Pigma micron, and I've used that for the stippling. And then you can see the areas where I've used the white of the paper for the lightest tones. So the thickest, chunkiest bits of the holdfast that were picking up the highlights from the way the light was interacting with the subject, I left the white of the paper as much as possible. And then I used the 005 in the front for most areas in the foreground. And then there were areas where I was depicting the varying surface texture and pattern. And quite often this was where another algae was growing on top of the holdfast itself. And this algae was a paler colour, so it was a contrast. And here you can see a video of me. I've created, it's sped up a little bit, so I've created an area where that white algae is, and then I'm filling in the negative space around it using stippling.
Okay, so, and here is the finished piece of work, and so spectacular piece of work in pen and ink from Sarah. Do look out the book. Lizzie Harper was also talking about pen and ink, but as you find in botanical art, people use the techniques in different ways and have different purposes for them. Now, Lizzie is a commercial artist, and what I mean by that is day to day, she's having to produce a lot of illustrations very quickly to make it financially worth her while. And she has a lot of work in that respect in terms of illustrations for field guides and books and all sorts of things. Again, do look Lizzie Harper up if you're interested in her work. So she's had to develop equally a relatively quick way of working so that she can get through all the things that she's asked for. And so in this little clip, she's going to talk about how she puts colour on top of her pen work. Whoops, I've just taken that too far. Let's try again.
Right, so this next technique is putting watercolour on top of completed pen and inks. And so again, we're looking here, this is quite a swift little film actually, but this is just looking at the hawthorn leaf that I did. And I'm holding up my trusty Winsor & Newton Series 7 sable brush, and I've listed the colours that I use. That blob on the side of the palette is Daniel Smith Spring Green. I never use green straight from the tube ever, because for some reason they just don't look like natural colour. But I do always mix them up, and I'm not with my paint boxes. People quite often say, oh, what colours have you got where? I actually really don't know, because I have pans and then I top the pans up with tubes, and mostly they're the same colour, but I'm never quite sure. I keep mixing until the colour is right. So what I'm doing here, this is the cartridge paper, and this is on top of the finished stippled illustration. I'm laying down the darks. Unlike a lot of botanical illustrators, in fact most botanical illustrators, I work dark to light. The fact that they can hold all that information on where the details are in their head as they paint is astonishing and awe-inspiring to me. So I do this, I work from dark to light. So in this video, we haven't got a great deal more of it. So you can see me laying down the darks, and then what I will do is I'll mix a slightly yellower and a more watery, pale version to go on top as a top wash. Leaving, as always with watercolor and in fact with pen and ink, leaving the white of your page as your highlights. working on cartridge is a little different from working on hot press watercolor, which I normally do. It's less forgiving. So the paint dries and it ain't going to move very far. So you might see me coming back and, oh, okay, so the film stops there, which is fine. But so you might see me coming back and going over. You can't, but you can see here in these. So these are finished. So you can see down there, I will have done the darks, and then I'll have done this top wash, which is paler, and then worked into it again with this dark where one leaf overlaps the other. I quite like the look of it. It's very tight, it's very neat, and in fact all the hard work is done for you. So what's brilliant about these illustrations, they all appeared in the Living Wisdom of Trees, and then the same publisher is bringing out another book that actually happens by Adele this time, The Tree Forager, that's coming out in August, and they wanted to reuse a lot of the illustrations from the Living Wisdom of Trees, but they wanted colour on top. Easy. So I found that you can just crack open your watercolours and do that. What I did find actually is that if you are too vigorous with the rubber when you're rubbing out your pencil line, then when you want to put the watercolour on top, it's almost like there's a plastic sheen on the page and it resists watercolour. And that was a nightmare, particularly, as I remember rightly, with this area of this fig leaf. But it was really fun. I really enjoyed doing this, and I like the effect. And then when they're reduced down, they look almost kind of jewel-like, which again, this thing of having your work reduced when it's published, it's so flattering. Everybody's work is improved by reduction.
Here are some more just little shots of Lizzie Harper's work, and Lizzie's coming back this year to do another talk, as are some of the other speakers, so do look her up if you're interested in knowing more. The talks will be different to the ones they gave last year. They won't be talking about the same thing. Let me just introduce you to the clip of Siobhan Doherty. So Siobhan works on vellum. So here's a couple of her wonderful paintings on vellum, but she's also passionate about insects, and she's done a lot of paintings in the recent years with bees and different insects on, I think mainly bees actually. You can see that she was commissioned to do some stamps for Ireland, but she's also done other bee painting. So her talk was called Pollinators in Botanical Art, and she was encouraging us to include bees in our painting and also to promote their demise, as it were, just to really make the world aware of their place in the natural world. And so she was giving us additional reasons why she thought we should paint bees. And I love this reason. This is reason number 4.
Botanical paintings with bees create a dialogue which makes them easy to sell. Yes, you have a painting with a bee in it. People love bees. They will buy that painting. I love that quote, the hum of the bees is the voice of the garden. So the painting on the left, I actually had painted those little daffodils and decided, the little miniature ones, and I hated the painting. Oh my God, this one was so close to being dumped for a number of reasons. I wasn't happy with it. It was just like this tangle. It just didn't work out. I wasn't feeling the love until I decided to add a bee. So I'm just going to show you quickly how I added the bee. I collect dead bees and I put them on little pins, and I use that bee to work out where I should put the bee on my painting. Should I see it from behind? Should I see it? And also I use it as a model. And with dead bees, I'm going to talk about this a bit more, that they don't look very alive. But so what you do is you use your dead bee as a model, use the head, the body, and the thorax as your model. And then you use reference photographs to work out where you can have your legs and the antennae. So here it is. I've got my model here. I'm working from this. I'm painting out the little thing. And as soon as I start painting it, immediately the flower looks like it's saying, come here, come here. Here's lovely, lovely nectar over this way. So and as soon as I added that bee, that was it. It was gone. It suddenly became a painting with a dialogue.
Fantastic. I hope that encourages you to paint bees. I mean, there was so much more information in the talk about how to make the bee look alive. And actually, she showed us a step-by-step painting of a little insect too. No time for that today. And we're actually on to our last artist now. And this is Mary.
Botanical.
This is Mary Dillon. and her subject was roses capturing a moment in watercolor, and she talked us through how she became captivated by some roses when she was on a particular trip and really wanted to paint them. And I think her talk was really motivational, and I really wanted to just finish this part of my presentation with this clip, because she's talking about how we can find our own passion for a particular specimen or a particular subject.
And I suppose what I wanted to do was maybe to say to you that, you know, when it comes to painting, we are very often, you know, captivated by different things. And I thought that maybe I would invite you to stop and think about what, you know, particularly for those of you who paint, what actually captivates you? What is it that, you know, gets you going? What is it that says to you, I've got to paint this? And, you know, thinking about this, I suppose I was thinking very much about the fact that, you know, it could be anything. It could be a memory. It could be a memory that sets a thought, and it could be seeing a particular flower, and it just kind of makes you think about something maybe even from your childhood. This was a drawing that I discovered recently, that I did when I was, I think, about 7. But when I saw it, I kind of remembered that day so vividly. It was my first ever school tour, and I clearly was into the roses because I drew the rose beds and the steps and the statues and the trees and, you know, the mountain. But, you know, it's memories like that that can sometimes captivate you and kind of really set a train of thought going that makes you feel like you want to paint something, okay? Or it could be a dream. It could be something very simple that makes you think about something that you would like to see happening, something you'd like to experience, something you would, you know, you would dream about. Or it could be something very much in the now, something that in a particular moment in time just captures your imagination. Or it could be a plant that sparks curiosity, that makes you kind of look a second time, that makes you say to yourself, you know, why are there so many stamens? Why does the sepal turn in that particular way? Why does why are the petals that color? Or it could be a connection. It could be, you know, something that it could be an image or an idea that connects you with a person. So I suppose really I just wanted to kind of explore the idea of the fact that every single artist who starts to make a piece of art is effectively really working from their own impetus. So it's really very much about you.
It's all about you. What a good place to end. Your subject choice, your viewpoint, your light source, your composition. So we've looked at so many different artists, but everybody is different and they all have a different approach. That's all, folks. Well, for 2021 at least. So because of the success of these talks and the interest from all around the world, I have also booked a whole load of tutors, teachers, speakers, tutors for 2022. And here's a little preview of who you could come along and enjoy. Mary's coming back again. Like I say, some people are returning. And then I've also got some new speakers. So I'm really excited about the programme for this coming year. I'm just going to see if I can share my website. Let's hope this works. Okay, so here is my website. So if you're interested in finding a bit more about the talks, if you look along the top and go to talks, it'll take you to this page where you can just get some information about the talks in general, and then just go down and see the different speakers and what they're going to be speaking about. So you've got Işık, who's a Turkish artist, and she's going to be talking about her explorations depicting irises. You've also got Laura returning, but this time she's going to talk about a trip to South Africa and the paintings that she's done for the Florilegium there. You've got Yanny, who paints on glass, so that's something quite unusual. Lizzie is going to come back and talk about sketchbook studies and so on and so forth. Jess Shepherd, you might know as Inky Leaves, and I love her leaf paintings as a leaf painter myself, but these are spectacular. You've got Simon Williams, who's going to talk about gouache, and Elaine Searle is going to talk about how things have been for the last couple of years and what has inspired her, and so on and so forth. Rachel Pedder-Smith did the most amazing 5-meter painting, the herbarium specimen painting. So she's going to talk about that too, which I'm really looking forward to. But that's June. Let's not wish our year away. And Jarnie too, who's now an online tutor, is going to talk about some paintings, all from zero to hero, how she, from being a beginner to an award-winning botanical artist, and so on and so forth. Yes, so do have a look at the website if you're interested in booking any of the future talks. I will just actually address some frequently asked questions before we finish. So how long are the talks? Well, I aim for them to be 1 hour. Occasionally they're slightly shorter, but mostly they tend to go over because that's supposed to include Q&A. We're not going to have Q&A today in the same way, but yeah, so they sometimes go over. Do you have to have a PayPal account? This is a very frequent question because not everybody likes to use PayPal, but they actually, this is how Zoom take the money using the PayPal system. It doesn't mean you have to have an account. What you need to do is when you go through pay and register here in the green, it'll take you to a box like this, and it implies that you need to log in with your account, and they really want you to get an account, but you don't have to. If you look further down, it should say, or pay by debit or credit card. So it's possible to pay for the talks without using PayPal. Unfortunately, in some countries, it doesn't allow you to do this, I understand, but mostly, hopefully, you don't have to go through PayPal if you don't want to. Can I pay for several talks at once? I have looked into this and I can't find a way of making this work, I'm afraid. I realise it's a bit of a hassle to register for each talk every single time, but I haven't managed to find a way to make that work. What I have done, though, is given a 25% discount if you book more than a month ahead. So at least you can get a bit of some money off if you're organised enough. So if it's at least a month ahead, you'll get the talks for less than £10. What if I can't watch live? Well, anybody watching this knows that they can watch a recording, actually. So I will always send out a recording to anybody that's registered. It tends to only be available over the weekend, like I said right at the beginning of the talk, to just give you that sense of let's watch this together, let's be all together, and then it times out. This talk actually may be available for longer because I really want to bring the work and wisdom of the coming speakers to a bigger audience. What can I add you? Can you add me to your mailing list? If you go to julia@juliatrickey.co.uk, you can email me and just let me know you'd like to go on the mailing list, or on my website there's also a way of subscribing. I won't spam you with email, I'll just remind you every now and again of who's coming up on these talks and maybe other courses I'm running. Okay, so thank you. I've really appreciated your support this year. So please tell your friends if you think they would be interested in future botanical art talks. Anyway, I've gone over the hour just, I think. And so I'm going to say thank you very much for joining me today. And if you've been a regular, for joining me over the last year. And if you're new, I really, really hope that we get to see you again. So that's all for me. I think I'm just going to say goodbye and thank you.